Hello, this is Dana and welcome to the Orchid Hut. Today we are going to be doing another decorative repot for a Tolumnia orchid. And a week or so ago I did one in kind of an open air Gideon pot. It was a white little pot, and we put some large bark chunks around the edges to hold the Tolumnia in place. And this decorative repot is going to be using a piece of Cholla wood. Now, if you're not familiar with this, Cholla wood is actually from a cactus plant in the Southwest. So when the cactus plant dies, it leaves behind this skeleton of Cholla wood, and it can usually be found in little chunks like this. A lot of people grow air plants in them, or it can be found in larger pieces for decorative type purposes, and then you can also buy pieces for animals, like from a pet store. The one thing you do have to be careful of if you're going to buy this for a pet or a plant is that it has not been treated with anything. So if you're uncertain of that, you might not want to use it for that purpose. I was fairly certain that these were untreated, but nonetheless I still poured boiling water over them just for good measure. Okay, so before we do this little Tolumnia as a decorative repot, let's take a look at one that I did several months ago. This is a Tolumnia bahamensis, and this little guy was a mail order Tolumnia, and it arrived from the grower on a very, very small, thin piece of cedar plank, and it was strapped on with some very tight fishing wire, which I really dislike. And over time, it just didn't seem like the root system was doing all that great, so I decided to try something different. And so I prepped this piece of Cholla wood and put the little Tolumnia down inside the cavity, and the root system has just taken off like gangbusters. So it really is enjoying this potting method. I think it's a cute little addition to your orchid collection. And I'm going to do this other Tolumnia in this other piece of Cholla wood that I have. Okay, so let's look at this first. Okay, so it's spelled Cholla wood, and this one was sold where air plants are sold, at my local Callaway's nursery. And for this piece I paid $7, which I think is a bit expensive. I really think that you could find this much less expensive, especially if it was a larger piece and you cut it yourself. Okay, so then the next thing is, let's look at the name of this little Tolumnia here. This is Tolumnia Jarrick Flyer Red Mask that we will be decoratively repotting in this piece of Cholla wood. And just like the previous Tolumnia that I repotted, I'm going to have to cut away this plastic net pot before we can put the Tolumnia in the cavity of the Cholla wood. So I'm going to go ahead and start that process of cutting the basket away. This one I don't think will be as complicated as the one I did before because the roots are not quite as gnarled together. If this does get too tedious though, I will fast forward the video. I'm hoping if I just go around here, the bottom will pop right off. Of course, I'm trying to avoid damaging any of the new root growth because this orchid does have some. Okay, so there's the bottom. And there were a few pieces of bark that had been down in the pot. And then the bigger challenge is always this plastic rim, which is really tough. And the pot is almost cracking more now from the pressure than it is being cut. So let me go this other direction. And I might need to do that one more time so it comes off in two pieces. Okay, so that's the pot off, and there's some new root growth, and then there's also some dead roots. So let me get my other pruners. And we will trim away some of these roots that are just clearly dry. Sometimes Tolumnia roots, even when they are brown and dry like this, they are still viable. Tolumnia roots can be deceiving. Sometimes they look a little woody, but yet they're still alive. So it is possible that I'm cutting off some live roots here, but ultimately I'm not cutting any of the newest root growth. And sometimes, too, a little trim actually promotes newer root growth. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to take this over to the sink and get this wet so that we can see the roots that green up. And now that I have it out of the net pot, I can also see some of the other dried plant parts that can be pulled out. Okay, I'll be right back from the sink. Okay. So now we can see that there's a good bit of new root growth around the Tolumnia, and this is a great time to put it into a new environment. So the way that I prep this piece of Cholla wood is I take some sphagnum moss. Now this does not have to be your best, most expensive moss. The roots are really not going to be down into this moss. It's just going to be a way to have some dampness at the bottom of the Cholla wood for the purposes of humidity. So let me get this wet. And once you decide which is going to be the top, and I think I decided earlier that I would like for this to be the top. So on the bottom, I'm simply going to stuff this sphagnum moss, and then you can kind of forget about it, because when you water this Tolumnia, this moss will re-wet itself, and it will just be like a source of humidity at the bottom of that, and so it'll just sit just like that. Okay, then next we're going to place the Tolumnia in this cavity. careful of the roots. And this one is larger than the first one I did, so staking it is probably not all that mandatory, but let me show you how that's done in case you try one of these and want to do it yourself. I have 2 short bamboo skewers, and I stick them into that sphagnum moss, one on one side and one on the opposite side. And try to avoid jabbing the roots. And then if you need to stabilize this plant for a while, you can bring those 2 flexible skewers together and just clip them at the top. And then that will stabilize the Tolumnia. I think I want to readjust this one so that it's in the middle of the fan. There, that's better. And, you know, make adjustments until it is pleasing. Okay. And that's pretty much it. I have a feeling that these Tolumnia roots will like all of the air spaces that the Cholla wood has. The roots may even decide to attach themselves inside the wood or on the outside of the wood. It's very easy to water. The water just runs straight through, or you can water it from the sides of the Cholla wood and it will drip down through the holes. And the bottom sphagnum moss will stay moist for a little extra while after you water it each time. So let's clean up the mess a little bit. And we need to put the tag back in this one. And they make 2 cute little side-by-side decorative Tolumnias. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. The subscribe button will be in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Thanks so much for watching. I'm enjoying everyone's comments. Please feel free to introduce yourself, and talk with you next time.